So fair play is really this idea of ownership, right? You have 100 cards and you re-deal the cards, you play the cards. It doesn't have to be 50-50, it just has to be fair. So it's a very actually straightforward way to run anything, right? Even my Aunt Marion's Mahjong group, guys, has more clearly defined expectations in the home, right? You don't bring snack twice to that group, you're out. But the home, we're not thinking of it as an organization. So very straightforward. Fair play is not rocket science, and we can talk more about how people play. But what was so alarming to me, the amount of women who said to me, there is no way I could bring this up. So I'll give you an example. During the pandemic, there was a Facebook group because, as you can imagine, everybody in the world brings me now anything that relates to unpaid labor in women.
Of course they do.
So this woman reached out to me and said, she tagged me in this Facebook group and she said, check this out. So there was a Facebook group and it was called The Reasons I Hate My Husband and Kids During COVID. Right. So, I mean, I think she was tagging me because she was like, when did you join? Right. Because I'm like, absolutely. But so there's a 27,000 member group out of the UK called The Reasons I Hate My Husband and Kids During COVID. So there was one woman, the reason why she tagged me, because there was one woman on the group, she posted, if my husband dies during COVID, it won't be because of the disease, it'll be because of me. So my team reached out to this woman and we said, hey, this is on behalf of a researcher who deals with the home. What's your division of labor like in your home? What made you write this post? How do you communicate with your partner? So she writes back kindly, I don't communicate about domestic life with my partner. This is my safe space. So can we just marinate on that for a minute? That publicly threatening to murder her partner in front of 27,000 strangers felt more safe to her than bringing up fairness to her partner.
Wow.
That's why this is a movement, because we have to get past this barrier that somehow we are the she-fault parent. And I think it's really important for us to recognize that there are systemic barriers for why it feels safer to say something like that in a Facebook group than it would to actually approach your partner about these issues.
100%. And I think, something I've experienced in my own life is that it's very hard to approach these issues where your partner is not automatically going to get defensive. And this is the truth of anything that's a potential small or large conflict in a partnership, right? If my husband comes to me with an issue, my gut is to go defensive in the same way. And so it's actually really interesting because we kind of created our own fair play system before we learned about fair play. When my son was about 3 weeks old and I had a meltdown that he thought he could go to bed, and I saw all of this work that needed to be done and I was hooked up to a breast pump. But the problem with that system was that eventually the needs changed. And what I really love about the system that you have set up is that you have set it up to address that as the needs are changing, particularly if you buy the playing cards, right? Mm-hmm. Right now, my husband has his cards in his pocket because we just did a divvy over breakfast this morning.
He's so proud of him. What's his name?
He has 2 more cards than me.
Oh, I love it. What's his name?
His name's John.
Oh, John. We love you, John. John, you are a cultural warrior because you parent out loud. You say these things out loud because you may think, Katie, that is normal. But John is still an anomaly, so we love John.
It is not. And, I think, and even still with someone he's very invested in this, he actually told me I needed to find my unicorn space, because I think that's going to be a really important conversation for us to talk about for this audience as well in a little bit. And I needed to finish it, and I have just been really struggling with my load at work recently. And so the night before last, he said, just go to a hotel. Just go to a hotel, check in, spend the night, order room service, read your book, get ready for your interview.
I love John.
This is an incredibly supportive partner. But I will tell you, I bought Fair Play, the card deck, and the book 3 years ago. And we only have recently begun actively implementing it. Now, we have clearly been talking about shared labor, domestic labor, mental load, and making those kinds of adjustments in our home for years. But we have only recently gotten to a point where it felt like, okay, we can talk about this where no one's being accused of anything. We can get to what you talk about as being, you know, the high cognition and the low emotion. And now we can sit down and focus on this. This episode is sponsored exclusively by G-Nate by Snip Therapeutics, providing genetics-powered nutrition tailored for every stage of the fertility, pregnancy, and postpartum journeys. With G-Nate, it's not just about a single product or service. It's about a journey toward optimal maternal and fetal health. From their insightful G-Nate test to their meticulously formulated prenatal vitamin, every step is a leap forward in maternal care. My own journey with G-Nate has been transformative, bringing a sense of control and peace in an often unpredictable time. They are changing the game in prenatal nutrition, and I'm proud to be part of the movement to provide personalized healthcare for every mother out there. Learn more at undefiningmotherhood.com/Gnate and use code undefining10 for 10% off. When we read the book, when we watch the documentary, and the documentary is something I highly recommend for everyone, because what you'll find is all of these, one, it's representations of all types of partnerships, not just heterosexual couples. And also you'll find that even in those, you know, heterosexual cisgender couples, the dads are always coming out saying in the end, our life is so much better. Seth, your husband, says in the end, our life is so much better. And I think more people need to see that. But it also kind of begs the question, when we're watching that, what we see is a lot of people on the brink. You know, when you started the system, when you were at your breaking point, in that particular realm, I've never been at my breaking point. If you know you want to implement this sort of thing, but it's not just like last straw, do this or the highway, how do you bring that up in a way that is going to keep people off of that defensive, find those moments of low emotion and high cognition? How do you set your partner up for that conversation?
Well, it's so beautiful you said that, Katie, because that's pretty much the data of what we find, that it takes about 3 years.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, about 3 years from people to finding these concepts where we are, illuminating it for them to actually implementing the fair play system. And I'll tell you why that is. It's because the secret formula, and we know this because of the documentary, we were able to follow hundreds of couples. And now, you know, we have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who play fair play in some way or another. But we were able to follow couples who had implemented fair play in 2019 when the book came out, right before the pandemic, and people who hadn't. We got to compare their angst. And as you can imagine, the people who had implemented fair play before the pandemic were doing a lot better. And that is in terms of two markers we asked them about: perceived fairness in the home. So they were perceiving fairness even through the pandemic, which a lot of people weren't, aka that Facebook group. And they were also, they said that their stress level was manageable. So those are two really important markers, I think, of what fair play does for people, because it's a tool. It's a tool. The card game, the book, the documentary, however you enter the conversation, it's a tool for you to use at your will. But the reason why it takes 3 years, or, you know, sometimes it takes less, but that often it takes less only when those two partners are ready to implement systems. For most people, they had never heard this before, so they need 3 things. And the secret formula is boundaries, systems, and communication. So how do I know that that was going to be a hurdle anyway? Because my day job for years is that I'm a lawyer. I work for families that look like the HBO show Succession. You've heard me say that.
Yes. You
should all feel bad for me. They are very difficult clients. I actually had a dream last night about a client where I was like locked in a room with his family. It's so weird. So still a lot of stress from those clients. But what I do for those families is I create grace and humor and generosity around really complex organizational decisions. So once I did that for these families, I figured I could do it for my own family. And that's how Fair Play was born. But the thing is that when you think about a holistic, thriving organization, systems is just one piece. So when I started to think about what I was going to do for my own home, which was either eat, pray, love this shit away from my husband and go to 50-50 custody, that was one option, or become my own client and create Fair Play, which is what I ultimately ended up doing. And yes, I'm still married to my husband, Seth. But the first thing I did was I said, if I'm going to treat the home as an organization and try to develop a system that's going to work for us, there are 3 things that I tell my clients that need to be there that are non-negotiables for a healthy organization.